Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Furlong, and today we're talking about the elements of life. All organisms have to exchange matter with the environment if they want to grow, reproduce, and maintain organization. And the simplest form of that matter is the atom. Now, you may recall from your freshman science days that there are three subatomic particles to an atom. There are protons, neutrons, and electrons. The protons and the neutrons are found together in the nucleus. If we count all those up, that tells us the atomic mass. The number of protons that there are is the atomic number. The atoms that we're going to be focusing on in this class, there's not that many actually. We're going to look at carbon, and then hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Now these atoms make up 99% of all living things. One way to remember that is the word CHNOPS. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. Atoms will form bonds in order to have a complete outer shell. Now you may recall, again from your freshman science days, atoms need to have what's called a complete outer shell. That means that their last shell has 8 electrons on it. And if we look at all of these elements, none of them have 8 electrons on its outer shell, so none of them are full. This is what is known as the octet rule. And atoms will form bonds with other atoms in order to either gain, lose, or share electrons in order for it to get a complete outer shell. So let's take a look at those bonds. One is an ionic bond. In an ionic bond, atom gains or loses an electron. So an example of this is sodium. Sodium has 1 electron in its outer shell. Chlorine has 7 electrons in its outer shell. So sodium can donate one of its electrons to chlorine. Now that means that sodium would go down to only having 2 shells, which both are full, and chlorine, by gaining that extra one, now has a complete outer shell. So what this means is that sodium, which has 11 protons, now only has 10 electrons. So this sodium atom becomes positively charged because it has an extra electron. Chlorine, on the other hand, which has 17 protons, now has 18 electrons. So chlorine is now negatively charged. And if we were to add water to this sodium chloride, this salt, the sodium would be positively charged, the chlorine would be negatively charged. Another type of bond that atoms can form are covalent bonds. Here, the atoms share electrons. So oxygen needs 2 more electrons to have a complete outer shell. Hydrogen, on the other hand, only needs 1 more electron because that first shell can only hold 2 electrons. And so by one hydrogen sharing one of its electrons with oxygen, and the other hydrogen sharing its electron with oxygen, both hydrogens can have 2 electrons, and the oxygen can have 8 electrons on its outer shell. So all the outer shells are full. Now these atoms make up the organic compounds. There's 4 types of organic compounds. There's carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made up of carbons, oxygens, and hydrogens. They make up lipids, which is also made up of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens. They make up proteins, which also carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, but you might see a few other new things here. There's some nitrogens, and if you look closely, you can see a sulfur on some of them. And then lastly, they make up nucleic acids, which are made up of, guess what? Carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, nitrogen, as well as phosphorus. So these 6 atoms, CHNOPS, make up 99% of all the organic compounds in a living organism, which I find extremely fascinating. See you in class.